Imagine a queen who ruled one of the most powerful empires on Earth, yet reeked so horribly that visiting ambassadors nearly collapsed. Her smile was a graveyard of blackened stumps. Her hair, a nest of decay, concealed rot and crawling life. Her baths? A foul brew of petals and sweat, more soup than cleansing ritual. She was the living embodiment of divine royalty, admired by millions, yet feared in her own court. Not for her armies, but for her unbearable stench. This is not some medieval ghost story. This was the daily reality of Elizabeth I, England's Virgin Queen. Elizabeth was no ordinary monarch. She stood against popes, outsmarted assassins, and built an empire that stretched across oceans. She inspired poets, commanded loyalty, and cultivated an image of almost supernatural power. But behind the palace walls, beneath layers of perfume, lead powder, and silken gowns, her body was crumbling. She was a ruler celebrated by Shakespeare, yet so plagued by pain she could barely chew bread. A queen who projected eternal youth, while hiding the slow rot eating away at her flesh. History remembers her as magnificent. This story reveals the truth behind that powdered mask. Elizabeth I was notorious for some of the most grotesque hygiene practices ever recorded. Teeth so decayed they turned her mouth into a small cemetery. Wigs alive with vermin. Skin poisoned by cosmetics until it peeled. And when death finally claimed her, a body so foul that London's streets nearly cleared from the odor. These were not simple quirks. They were obsessions. Rituals born of fear, pride, and the crushing burden of image. And so in this video, we'll uncover why Elizabeth's closest attendants dreaded being near her. Why foreign dignitaries returned home whispering not only of her brilliance, but of her unbearable stench. And why, centuries later, her decayed truth still lingers in the shadows of her legacy. Before we begin, share your location in the comments. We love seeing how far this story travels. And if you're brave enough to stomach the gruesome details, hit like, share this tale with a friend who dreams of royal life, and subscribe to Echoes of Torture for more dark truths history tried to hide. Ready? Let's begin with the affliction that defined her image more than any crown or jewel. Her teeth. It's the late 1500s. You are a foreign ambassador, about to meet the most powerful woman in Europe. You step into her grand hall, light spilling through stained glass, illuminating her figure. There she stands, majestic, composed, resplendent. She smiles, greets you, and speaks, and the stench hits you like a blow. Your eyes water, your stomach twists. You wonder, has something inside her already begun to decompose? Elizabeth I was infamous not just for bad breath, but for a mouth that had become a chamber of decay. Her teeth clung stubbornly to her gums like corpses in a battlefield, dark, broken, and oozing infection. Courtiers whispered about it. Ambassadors recorded it. Even her closest attendants begged her to seek help, but Elizabeth refused. The rot began early. In her 20s, she developed a deep love for sugar, white crystals imported from her prized Caribbean colonies. Sugar was more than food. It was status. To eat it daily was to flaunt wealth and dominion, and Elizabeth adored it. Toothbrushes existed, but they were crude. Cloths soaked in soot or salt, rubbed against teeth with about as much effectiveness as scraping them with a stone. Nobles tried exotic powders, ground coral, rosemary ash, even urine, but Elizabeth clung to something worse: honey. She believed it protected her teeth, though historians now know it only quickened their destruction. By her 40s, many teeth had already fallen out. What remained were blackened stumps, described by horrified visitors as lifeless pegs in a bleeding field. Chewing became agony. Bread had to be softened. Meat was boiled into mush. At banquets, she often turned her head away, hiding her struggles behind fans and curtains. One physician suggested removing a rotting tooth. Elizabeth ordered him never to return. Another offered to demonstrate the painlessness of extraction by removing one of his own teeth first. He did. He screamed. He collapsed in blood. Elizabeth only smiled, her jaw clenched in pain, and dismissed him. For Elizabeth, it wasn't just about the pain. It was about pride. To admit weakness, especially as a woman in a world that doubted female power, was unthinkable. Better to endure rot than reveal vulnerability. She masked the smell with rose petals tucked into her mouth, chewed cloves to sweeten her breath, and commissioned silver-plated utensils to give the illusion of radiance when she ate. But silver could not stop the odor. Foreign dignitaries coughed through her speeches. A Spanish ambassador wrote home, "She is majestic and intelligent, but her mouth is a small cemetery." As her teeth decayed further, her speech faltered. Elizabeth, once celebrated as one of history's greatest orators, began slurring her words. Shakespeare himself adjusted lines in plays to avoid sounds the Queen could no longer pronounce. Her attendants swore secrecy, but some could not resist describing their horror. One wrote that the stench of her breath was profane, worse than any chamber pot. Even her physicians tried to intervene with herbal rinses and gold fillings. She accused them of witchcraft. The decay spread into her jawbone. Flesh sagged inward. Pain shot from her gums into her ears and temples. Still, she refused to yield. She painted her lips redder, tightened her smile, forbade anyone from seeing her without makeup. Pain was weakness. Decay was hidden. In portraits, she gleamed with pearly teeth and rosy lips, images carefully crafted by painters who knew that revealing the truth could cost them their lives. Thus, Elizabeth's mouth became a secret grave she carried within, silent and deadly, never acknowledged. And it was only the beginning. To most of us, water means purity, life, renewal. To Elizabeth I, it meant death. The Virgin Queen came to believe that water was a poison that could seep through her skin, invade her blood, and drown her from within. Doctors reinforced this paranoia, warning her that bathing might weaken her essence, and so she made a choice. She would not wash. Instead, she covered. Her body was daily drenched, not in clean water, but in perfume. Servants dabbed her skin with cloths soaked in vinegar, rose water, and wine, not to clean her, but to disguise her. Her gowns were steeped in oils of sandalwood, myrrh, and musk, heavy with sweat beneath layer after layer of clothing. She wore up to 6 layers at once: corsets, chemises, petticoats, bodices, skirts. Beneath it all, her flesh sweated and festered. The odor was infamous. A French envoy wrote of a sweet sickness mingled with roses, a scent that nearly made him retch. Her chambers reeked of incense, lavender sachets, and unwashed sheets. Servants begged to change her linens more often. She refused, claiming her own body's scent was necessary for her dreams. Her bath, a lavish porcelain tub lined with golden cherubs, was almost never used. On rare occasions, she allowed attendants to prepare a ceremonial soak. They would scatter flowers, pour in warm water blessed by priests, and watch as Elizabeth lowered herself into the perfumed mixture. But she did not wash. She sat. Hours passed as petals wilted, oils congealed, and sweat mingled with weeks of dirt. The water was never replaced, only perfumed again. By the end, It resembled soup. One servant described the smell as funeral flowers steeped in milk. Even in her rare baths, she left unwashed. Her attendants wrapped her in satin sheets instead of towels, preserving the illusion of radiance. In truth, her skin was cracking, flaking, and rotting beneath the paint. Physicians begged her to bathe properly. When one tried to clean behind her ears with ointment, she screamed, accused him of sorcery, and had him expelled. To Elizabeth, water was not cleansing. Sweat was, perfume was purity, her odor divine, but her body rebelled. Rashes bloomed under her corsets. Wounds festered on her thighs. Flakes of dried perfume clung to her arms like scales. Still, she believed that water would kill her, and that the stench of her own body was a sacred aura. Foreign rulers mocked her privately. They called her the Rose of England rotting on its stem, but no one dared say it to her face, for her odor was as untouchable as her crown. This too was only one mask. For when the stench grew unbearable, Elizabeth found another shield: paint. When water became her enemy, Elizabeth sought another way to preserve the illusion of beauty: paint. For the Virgin Queen, cosmetics were not simply decoration. They were armor, propaganda, a mask that transformed a mortal woman into a divine symbol. But beneath that mask, her body began to corrode. Elizabeth's signature look, the pale, glowing skin immortalized in portraits, was not a gift of nature. It was the work of a substance called Venetian ceruse, or souse, a thick paste of white lead and vinegar. Applied daily, it gave her the appearance of porcelain, smooth, untouched, eternal. Courtiers and poets compared her to a goddess, shimmering under candlelight. Artists depicted her with radiant skin, luminous and flawless. But souse was poison. Lead seeped through her pores, into her blood, her bones, her brain. It killed slowly, and Elizabeth applied it every single day. She had reason. At 29, she survived smallpox, but it left pits and scars across her face. For a woman whose rule depended on the image of youth and perfection, such marks were intolerable. So she covered them, layer upon layer. Over time, the paint refused to remain skin-deep. Her flesh cracked and peeled. Sores opened on her cheeks. Ulcers formed under the powder. Yet rather than remove it, her maids painted over the wounds again and again, creating a mask that concealed agony with divinity. By her 40s, Elizabeth's once expressive face had stiffened into a mask of pain. Smiling could tear open her skin. Laughing left trails of blood. But in portraits, she remained serene, immortal, untouchable. And Sue's was only the beginning. Her cosmetic arsenal read like a recipe for death. For blush, she used cinnabar, mercury sulfide, a toxin that caused tremors and madness. For lip color, vermilion, another mercury compound. For eyeshadow, lamp black made of soot and ash. To dilate her pupils, she used drops of belladonna, deadly nightshade, a hallucinogen that blurred her vision and left her eyes blood red. Her eyebrows thinned and vanished. Her hair fell out. Her lashes disappeared. She powdered her forehead, painted on new brows, and turned to wigs to replace what she had lost. Physicians warned her. They saw her skin rotting, her body trembling, her mind fraying. They begged her to stop. Elizabeth refused. "My face is my throne," she declared. It wasn't vanity alone. It was survival. Elizabeth ruled a court obsessed with youth and purity. If she revealed weakness, if she showed age or illness, her enemies would circle. So she painted on immortality, even as it devoured her. Lead poisoning brought tremors, paranoia, sleepless nights. She lashed out at her maids for minor mistakes, accused courtiers of betrayal, grew suspicious of even her closest allies. Her back hunched, her fingers curled. Yet every morning, the ritual continued. Oils, powder, paint, blush, more powder. Hours of agony to create a face that looked divine but felt like fire. Her attendants whispered of fainting spells. One maid later confessed that peeling away the souse revealed raw, bleeding flesh that made her vomit. Elizabeth struck her across the face for daring to react. In public, the Virgin Queen shone like a goddess. In private, she rotted. And if the mask of paint was horrifying, what lay beneath her wigs was even worse. By her late 30s, Elizabeth's once glorious red hair began to fall out in clumps. Decades of toxic treatments, lead, mercury, soot, had choked her scalp and killed her follicles. Baldness loomed, and in her court, hair was not just vanity, it was power. So she turned to wigs, not one or two, but dozens. Some curled, some braided, some towered high above her head, sculpted into unnatural shapes, all powdered white to match her painted face, and all hiding what lay beneath. The wigs were crafted from horsehair, goat hair, even hair taken from servants or corpses. They were glued to wire frames with sticky pastes of starch, eggs, and animal fat. Heavy, hot, unwashed. And where there was starch and warmth, there was life. Lice, fleas, maggots. One servant later whispered that, lifting her wig one morning, they found wriggling white larvae near her scalp. They said nothing, because to speak of Elizabeth's rot was treason. Instead, they sprinkled lavender powder, replaced the wig, and bowed. Ambassadors wrote cautiously of a strange smell emanating from her crown. Not perfume, not sweat, something organic, something wrong. One Italian diplomat wrote, "The Queen of England adorns her head with a garden, though I suspect it grows more than blossoms." Some wigs were so enormous that carpenters had to carve archways taller just so she could pass through. Her favorite was a towering red corkscrew decorated with pearls. It weighed nearly 20 pounds. She wore it with a steel collar to support the weight. Beneath it, her scalp festered, sores cracked, wounds bled, pins dug deep into her skin, sometimes embedding themselves into her skull. Physicians begged her to stop. She refused. "My scalp is not for your peasant hypotheses," she snapped. "It upholds the crown." Her wigs became ceremonial objects. They were sanctified by priests before being placed on her head. Lost strands were buried like holy relics. Servants guarded them at night as if they were treasures. Behind closed doors, they were washed in vinegar and dried over coals, but never fully cleaned. Mold crept into the linings. Infection spread across her scalp. Yet Elizabeth persisted. The wigs were not optional. They were sacred. Without them, she believed her image and her realm would collapse. By her final years, her scalp had deteriorated so badly that she wore an iron mesh cap beneath her wigs. It cut into her skin, leaving permanent wounds. She fainted in court from infection, yet demanded the wig be reapplied before she regained consciousness. Even in death, the wigs remained. Morticians refused to remove them, fearing what lay beneath, and so Elizabeth was embalmed with her crown of horsehair still clinging to her rotting scalp, the final mask in a life built on illusion. Elizabeth's cosmetics poisoned her blood, her wigs infested her scalp, her perfumes cloaked decay, and yet to her people she remained radiant. Portraits showed a queen untouched by time. Writers praised her immortal beauty. In reality, her body was crumbling, piece by piece, beneath the weight of deception. She had become a living paradox. The Virgin Queen, divine and eternal in the eyes of the world, while inside her own palace, Attendants whispered of rot, pus, and maggots. But perhaps the most disturbing chapter of all came after her final breath, when even death itself could not hide the stench. By the dawn of the 17th century, Elizabeth I had reigned for more than 4 decades. She had defeated the Spanish Armada, inspired an artistic golden age, and held her kingdom together through storms of betrayal, war, and conspiracy. To the world, she was immortal, the Virgin Queen, God's chosen ruler. But inside her chambers, the image was unraveling. In her final weeks, Elizabeth grew silent. The once vibrant queen who had sparred with courtiers and dazzled audiences now sat still, swathed in velvet, staring into nothingness. She refused food. She refused water. She refused rest. Her attendants begged her to sleep. She shook her head. "If I close my eyes," she whispered, "I will not open them again." She was right. By March of 1603, death crept in. Yet even then, Elizabeth clung to ritual. She demanded her wigs. She demanded her paint. Even on her deathbed, she wore the mask of divinity. But when her final breath escaped, the illusion collapsed. Death should have preserved dignity. Instead, it unleashed horror. Almost immediately, Elizabeth's body began to decay, faster than anyone could believe. The years of poison, lead, mercury, perfume, and rot had transformed her flesh into a chemical battlefield. When life left her, the destruction erupted. Her skin swelled and darkened. Her lips blackened. Her neck ballooned. Fluids seeped from her nostrils. Her fingers twisted like withered leaves. The odor was instant, overwhelming. Attendants tried to mask it with roses, incense, and bowls of vinegar, but nothing could silence the stench. The room grew unbearable. Maids fainted. Guards gagged. The Queen's chamber became unapproachable. Even her coffin could not contain it. The first one was reinforced, sealed in crimson lining. Still, the odor seeped through. The coffin had to be replaced, twice. Rumors spread quickly. Some whispered that Elizabeth was cursed. Others claimed her body was being consumed by the poisons she had worshipped. Physicians privately admitted the truth. She had slowly poisoned herself, and in death, her body tore itself apart. Tradition demanded that the Queen's body be displayed before her people. But her attendants faced an impossible task. How could they present a corpse already dissolving? The answer was deception. Her face was covered with a wax mask, smooth and flawless, hiding the ruptured flesh beneath. Her hands were encased in gloves. Her lips were sewn shut. Lace was wrapped so tightly around her neck that her jawline alone showed. To the crowd, she appeared serene. To the guards standing close, the truth was unbearable. As the coffin was carried through London, thousands wept. They believed they were seeing a queen at peace. They did not see the dark stains seeping through the silk. They did not smell what the guards smelled. They did not notice the flies gathering around the bier. Those who escorted the casket were ordered to rotate every 10 minutes. The odor was too powerful to endure for longer. Even outside in the open air, the scent followed. When the embalmers worked on her remains, their horror was recorded in whispers. Her skin had ruptured beneath the paint. Her cheeks had collapsed inward. One eye had sunk into its socket. Her internal organs bore the marks of a lifetime of toxins. Her liver blackened like coal. Her lungs heavy with sediment. Her bones brittle and porous. They would not describe her brain. No royal had ever decayed so quickly. No ruler had carried so much death within their body while still alive. And yet, to the public, none of this was revealed. Elizabeth was buried in Westminster Abbey beside her half-sister Mary. She was remembered as radiant, eternal, divine, but rumors lingered. Some said the tomb itself emitted a sweet, sickly odor for years after. Visitors left flowers, believing the scent holy. In truth, it may have been the last trace of a body consumed by poison. Elizabeth's reign remains one of the most celebrated in English history. She steered her nation through danger, nurtured the arts, and projected power in a world that doubted women could rule. She cultivated the image of the Virgin Queen, beloved by her people and feared by her enemies. But beneath that image lay rot. She feared weakness so deeply that she chose paint over skin, perfume over water, wigs over truth. She constructed her kingdom on myth, and she paid for it with her body. Her life reminds us of a truth as old as time. Power cannot stop decay. Beauty cannot escape death. Even the mightiest rulers are still flesh, fragile and fleeting. In the end, Elizabeth I was both magnificent and monstrous. She was the Virgin Queen, yet also a woman who poisoned herself daily, who rotted while still alive, who terrified her attendants with the very smell of her presence. History preserved her as a goddess. Reality reveals her as a ghost. Even centuries later, her legend survives in portraits. Ivory skin, fiery hair, eternal youth. But we now know what those portraits concealed. Behind the mask was a woman terrified of mortality, a queen who chose illusion over truth, a monarch who ruled not only with armies and laws, but with cosmetics, perfumes, and wigs, tools that slowly destroyed her. Her story is more than grotesque. It is human. For who among us does not fear the mirror? Who does not long to preserve youth, to appear stronger than we are? Elizabeth's tragedy is not only hers, it is ours, reflected in our own masks of vanity. But few have ever taken it so far. Few have ever built a throne on rot. And so, the Virgin Queen endures, a figure of triumph, of terror, and of decay. Now you know the truth behind the powdered mask. Elizabeth I, the queen who inspired Shakespeare and defeated empires, was also the queen whose teeth rotted in her gums, whose wigs crawled with vermin, whose body decayed while she still lived. Was she a victim of her era, when medicine was ignorance and beauty was poison? Or was she trapped by her own obsession with image, sacrificing her health for power? Tell us your thoughts in the comments, and let us know where you're watching from. We love hearing from our global audience. If you endured all the grotesque details of this story, you've earned a crown. Tap the like button to prove your courage. Share this tale with a friend who dreams of royal life, and remind them, not all that glitters is gold. And don't forget to subscribe to Echoes of Torture, where we reveal the darkest truths history tried to bury. Until next time, stay curious. Question the legends. And remember, beneath every mask, there may be a grave.